People are probably thinking right now, you sent a high school kid a limo for prom at the company? Yeah, because this kid was talented. We wanted him to come back, right?
Retention is crucial for most companies to scale and succeed. That said, how much is a healthy retention rate actually worth? How do you even go about finding that out? Let's see if we can shed some light. This is the Culture Clinic, where my co-founder, Skye, and I are constantly learning from HR experts how to build a culture where people love to work. My name is Joe. I'm a co-founder here at Guusto, and today we are joined by Quasi Thomas, an HR expert in rewards and recognition. Quasi, let's dive right in.
Hey, Joe, let's do it.
Okay, so today's topic, how much is employee retention really worth? Can you think of a time in your career when a key colleague left your company? And, what kind of challenge did that create for you?
Because I was in a couple of companies that were shrinking for a couple of years, there were many times that we had colleagues leave. Probably most notable in my head, I was working with another leader in rewards. And when she had left, I had to pick up the rest of the rewards at that time. And at that time, it wasn't just that she was leaving. At the time, I think the team was probably 15, 16, 17. And when she left, the team was like 9 or 8 after stuff, because a lot of people left at the same time as part of a downsizing. And so for me, that was challenge wasn't just myself having to expand and pick up work, but everyone who was now on my team also had to pick up and expand and do other work. And so managing through the change of work and the change of morale and the change of culture was definitely an experience. It was challenging.
Yeah, so you touched on a few things there. So it sounds like a key colleague or some key colleagues leaving impacted your workload. Is that
correct? Yeah. So at the time, we as a rewards team, we were pretty large, and we were downsizing as a company in general. So we not only did my colleague or my peer leave, the team that I had inherited, as well as my own team at the time, all got smaller at the same time. So the workload grew quite a bit for everyone, including myself.
And okay, so the workload grew for most people on your team, and then were there some things that just didn't happen anymore because those people no longer with you?
Not easy, but yeah, we did have to say no to some things and stop doing some programs at the time. But that's probably a lesson learned more than we did that well. The lesson learned was, in such a drastic change, you've got to figure out when to say no and what has to stop. We probably did that well, but we did have to stop doing some work.
So you mentioned morale. I mean, how did losing some of your colleagues impact morale?
I mean, hard. I think if you're in the extreme downsizing, then looking around and seeing the team get smaller, and the team, you start thinking, okay, am I at risk? Are other people who are the work I'm going to change at risk? Or how does this all affect me? And I think for people navigating any sort of change in the team around you, whether the person is, especially when they're not leaving voluntarily, the company is asking the person to leave for whatever reason, there's this sense of uncertainty personally and professionally that people go through that's very hard to navigate. And as a leader and trying to navigate that for your team, it's very difficult. But keeping people engaged, wanting to do the work, wanting to be excited on the work they're doing, giving their best is difficult in those times.
Do you think, Quasi, that there is a healthy amount of turnover? Like,
I think, to be frank, I think there is, but what's healthy isn't a prescriptive number. I see people say, "Oh, the bottom 5% or some other, definite number." I don't think that works. But having new ideas, new changes, people who are, maybe in a role where they're just that's where they are in their journey. They can help for this part of the journey, but they're not the right person for the next part of the journey. Mm-hmm. That, to me, there are healthy reasons why that turnover happens. Hopefully it's not just because we can't keep people, no one wants to stay, we're not paying well, it's a bad environment. That's just bad turnover. But if it's, for good reasons, you've got people who are growing and learning, who are getting promotions and roles and jobs outside, or you've got people who are just, we're right to help you from $0 to $1 million, but they're the wrong person to lead marketing from $1 million to $5 million. And so there's good, healthy reasons for change and turnover.
I see that argument from a business perspective, right? Where there's a business need for a certain skill set at a certain stage of the company, and then there's potentially a different business need and a different skill set at a different stage of the company. How do you think about because there's still the human element here, right? Where you're working with a person and relationships have been forged at the organization. And so while, there might be a business argument to make change, how do you navigate that internally without impacting morale, or is that impossible?
I think, I honestly, as long as someone's doing it, outside of people be leaving for bad reasons, I think anytime someone leaves, there's going to be a shift in the morale for some period of time. How long that valley is or how deep that valley goes is a matter of how you managed it, how you communicated it, how you've managed to fill the gap, and how well that ramp comes back up. But I think that any change as people, as humans, there's always a valley to go through. And so as a company, there's no avoiding it. The question is how quickly can you come out of that, and how shallow can you make that valley, because you don't want to go too deep as well. And so I think that takes skill, and it takes a lot more attention from the people involved, the leaders involved, to make sure that happens and we move through it quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Good thought. It's said that replacing an employee can cost anywhere from 25% to 100% of that person's annual salary. Just curious, why is that the case, and can you break that down a little bit? Where do the costs come from? I
think that spectrum from 25 to 100 is probably fair. Depends on the role they're doing. Different replacing some roles than other roles, right? And so if I break down that cost, there's clearly some hard costs. There's recruiting or finding the new person that has real costs to it. And sometimes those costs are obvious in terms of your team's effort to find them. The signing bonuses and other things that may come along with it, those are easy to quantify. There's a loss of the productivity that happens, not just for that one person's role. And I think some people only think, we're only losing the person who makes that widget. No, that loss is actually some effect of the people around them who are also making that widget, or the manager who's got to spend a bit more time finding and replacing and then training that new person. And so there are, the hard costs are easier to find. The other costs are not as easy to find. And if this job takes, a certain amount of trained skills, so sometimes, let's take a company building ships. Like you can't just hire somebody off and say, hey, great, go weld that hull together. There's certifications and trainings and things that have to go through before they can do that. And so there is hard costs sometimes to having to upskill the next person that you've already invested in the person before.
Yeah, I guess depending on the role, it could take 3, 6, 9, 12 months for someone to truly get up to productivity, right?
Right. There's actually, I think there's a shipbuilding company in Vancouver, Seaspan, and they go through pains in terms of certifying the people who are working on those ships. And so having those people turn over and go somewhere else, it's very expensive, because they've got an entire team on site and a lab where they teach and certify you to do certain things. You can't replace those people easily.
Yeah, and I guess if you lose somebody and their colleagues have to pick up the slack, then the other people on those team are, I guess, at greater potential of burning out or having to say no to other things. And so there's some productivity loss and or impact on the greater team. And so, with that, how would you quantify the value of retention to other leaders?
So the value of retention, immediately you should identify the value of replacement is easy to do or easier to do. What does it cost to replace this person, right? And that one's where most people go. They go the negative. What does it cost to replace? The one I love articulating is, what's the value of actually engaging them and retaining them? What happens if they get better at this? Or if they're at, they've been here for 6 months, let's retain them for a year and get them more productive. And so I look at some of my own clients, like I have a winery I'm involved with, and they go through seasonal staff, right? And last year we took the approach, hey, why don't we try to get our seasonal staff, instead of having a ton of people with 2 shifts, 3 shifts, let's retain them and give them as close to full-time hours as seasonal staff as we can. And during the off season, if they need hours, let's try to engage them. And what we saw was a tremendous leap in not just the productivity of the people we were retaining, but we didn't need as many people, because those people, their skill, like what they were able to do, they could do 1.5 of what they were doing before. And so articulating the the improvement is harder to do, but I think it's well worth going through that exploration.
You nailed it.
That one took a minute.
I'm trying to think of the term, when somebody develops this more than sort of like industry knowledge, but they have this specific knowledge of how the company operates, and there's no way, there might be ways to accelerate that for new hires, but there's no time. Nothing beats just spending time at an organization and sort of like learning the nuance of how things operate and knowing A to Z, kind of like, hey, where we keep the things, or where do I go to get this? And like all of that adds up to a more productive team member. So
yeah, Joe, I don't even know if there is a definition out there, but you are bang on that. Like there's this point where some people just become this amazing Swiss Army knives of just knowing, right? And so they can just navigate, you're just like, throw them in and they know they can navigate and adapt and make something successful happen. Invaluable like organizations.
So there are industries where turnover is historically high. And so is high turnover okay if you're in a traditionally high turnover industry? So for example, retail or hospitality, or is it still something you should be working to reduce?
I think you always have to work to reduce it. The cost of offboarding, replacing or hiring and ramping someone is always expensive, no matter what your organization or your, the job types are. So I think every organization has to work to minimize the cost of that cycle, right? And then I think, we just talked about it for a bit, but the increased productivity of someone who's actually been in a job for a while pays off in dividends. So I think no matter what industry you're in, you're trying to reduce that turnover cycle, right? If you're accepting, you're just like, hey, we'll just replace them. Maybe there are some roles. I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head, but like, lawn care companies replace people a lot, right? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, when you've got some people who actually know what they're doing, can save you half an hour loading the truck and moving on, that's still better than replacing people all the time. So I can't see an industry where you wouldn't reduce turnover as much as you could.
Yeah, I think of like an industry like retail. We have a number of retail clients where I think that some retail organizations approach turnover almost like a mindset, where they look at their staff as, well, this is going to be their first job, and so we don't actually anticipate that we're going to keep them very long. And then as a result, they don't necessarily treat their people the way they should be. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Where, well, they're not going to stay around anyway, so why should we do all the extra things? But there are organizations in those industries that are doing things the right way, that are investing in learning development, career growth, and in many instances, they are leading their category. And so I'm certain, and love your thoughts, that I'm certain that there's a correlation there.
Yeah, there has to be, right? You'll see a lot of these organizations. Let's take fast food, McDonald's.
Yeah,
they go through lengths to make sure people are staying and not just coming in and going out, right? That they've got the science of ramping, hiring and ramping, et cetera, down very well, but they have a ton of programs to keep people engaged and wanting to stay for just that reason. You want to minimize the cost of that cycle, and retail's no different. I think once you've got somebody in retail who knows how to work your point of sale, who knows how to receive your stock, how to display your stock on the floor, how to answer customer questions, how to open, how to close. Once you've got all that into someone who knows what they're doing, replacing them with someone else who's going to have no idea how to do half of what I just said, it cannot be good for your productivity. You want to keep them.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned McDonald's. It's interesting. They've got McDonald's University. And while I only understand what they're doing at an arm's length, my sense there is that they're showing people a path to career growth, right? So that on day one, that they know that there are stepping stones and they can stay with the organization and continue to learn and grow. So it's pretty impressive what McDonald's has done there, right?
Wildly impressive, right? And it took, I think, someone listening to a podcast like this kind of going, I should retain people more. No, but really and truly, somebody had to have that brave conversation being like, I know we're fast food. I know we hire really quickly and people go in and out, but what would happen if we just invested in keeping people, right? And clearly it's been working, or they wouldn't continue to make that massive investment in keeping people.
Yeah, and we have large retail clients that have connected the dots now, right? They've looked at their turnover and they are now asking themselves, well, even though this is somebody's first job, if we can keep that person with us for another 18 months, if another 2 years, the impact of being able to do that, the impact of doing that is tremendous. And so investing in people programs, making sure people feel appreciated, those are programs worth investing in, even in those high turnover industries.
Weird random story for you. I was working at a high tech company. This one I won't name the company, but we had a developer who was in high school, right? And he was a killer developer, and we went through lengths to keep him. We sent him a limo for prom. He had stock options that vested while he was working and paused vesting when he was in school. Like, we did everything so he knew when you were done school, don't go look for another co-op or intern somewhere. You are coming back, right? And that was because, that wasn't necessarily a high turnover situation. That was just because we wanted to retain talent that we knew we were investing in, right? And so sometimes, it goes a little bit out of the box for what people think, oh, why would we keep them? But if you've got talented people you want to keep, retain them. And if that means going out of the box, people are probably thinking right now, you sent a high school kid a limo for prom at the company? Yeah, because this kid was talented. We wanted him to come back, right? And we knew that the other big ones, the Googles, the et cetera, were going to throw everything they could at him. So we did what we could. We got outside the box. And retaining people like that, like where you've got talented people you want to retain, man, just go after it. I've never seen it, maybe it doesn't work out every time, but I've never seen it be like, oh, we're horrible that we retained that person we thought would be amazing. No, you want to keep them.
Yeah, it's a great story. We've done some similar things here at Guusto. Honestly, like we've had a great track record bringing young people into the organization through internships and co-ops, and in many instances we identify stars, and so we see that and have done some creative things to ensure that those people know that they've got a career here with us once they graduate, and we go above and beyond to ensure that they're sticking with us. Once they get their degree and want to come into the workforce full time. So I wholly agree with that strategy. So when people talk about turnover, they don't often focus on the employees who get left behind and the pressure it puts on them. So what strategies can you suggest to support employees in this situation?
Yeah, I think this is almost entirely overlooked by most organizations, and sometimes. In fact, a lot of times the organization says, hey, you survived. You're the one who's still here, so be grateful and then just do more work, right? And I think that's the completely wrong approach. Like it should be thrown out the door. The people who are around the change are the people you need to, invest in a little bit more at that time. You need to speak to them more often as leaders, recognize them more often than not, because they are doing things outside of their previous workload that you may know about, and sometimes you'd have no clue that they're picking it up. You don't know that report that person used to do that someone else is not doing affects them in some way. And so paying attention to the team, talking to them, recognizing the work that they're doing in that time is really important. I talked about the valley, I said it earlier, but that period of time where the colleagues around the person are trying to figure out what the work day looks like, figure out who they're going to go to coffee with in the morning now because that person's not there anymore. The more you can help them go through that valley quickly, the better. And I think as leaders, we often forget that is critical in changing morale. When we're talking about companies that are doing downsizing, this becomes even more important. But just regular changes in the company, it's important to talk to people. I think there's nothing more important. There are lots of HR things you can do in terms of salaries and pay people for taking on additional work for a period of time and acting things. All that is important, but to me, if they don't actually understand what is happening, what is going to happen to that work, what are they expected to do with that work, and where the end state is, they're just left making up their own theories, right? And you don't want to do that.
So it sounds like communication is key when you're going through a restructuring, a downsizing, when you have to let someone go. Keeping the people looped in of the why around the decision. Yep.
And what you're going to do. Like, are we backfilling this role? Am I supposed to just do this job for the next 4 years while we just take on the savings as the big old bad company that just doesn't have one less headcount? All of that's important to talk through so the employees know what's going on.
What are your thoughts on this sort of concept of giving employees permission to say no, right? Where it's like, if we're asking you to do something else, we understand that you may have to say no to something else. if we're asking, as a company, if we're asking you to do something more, then we kind of give you permission to say no to something else. What are your thoughts around that? Have you heard of this concept? And
I've definitely said it a few times. I've definitely heard it a few times as well. No bullshit. I think it's a great thing to say, a great thing to tell people out loud, and to let them feel empowered to say no. I think the real conversation is, let's talk about what we need to take off your plate, and have a conscious decision that we're going to say no. Most employees aren't okay just saying no to things left to their own devices, right? And so I think it's a good thing to say, but I think the more productive conversation is, I need you to pick up these 4 hours of work. I need to find those 4 hours somewhere else. Let's talk about what we have to take off to find those 4 hours, and do that together. But I like the saying. It sounds really good.
So it's a more of a collaborative approach.
Yeah, for sure. And can you imagine, like, somebody else calls you up, you're in marketing, off the sales team calls you up and says, hey, can you do this after? You're like, no, my person just left. I'm not doing that for you. You're not doing that, right? So I think it's a great concept, but I think more practically, we have to actually plan the work with people, actually talk about what work we're doing and plan it.
What do you do to retain your high performers? Are you doing anything different than what you're doing with everyone else? Just love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in some situations, especially in high tech, where the broad theories and talking points will say everybody's treat them all the same and they're all doing a great job. But the truth is, in many of these companies, you're going to have some high performers who are outpacing and have a larger impact to the company. And for that portion of the team, maybe you're not creating special programs, but you're investing differently. You might be paying at a higher bed. You might be doing bonuses differently. You might be making sure they're on the projects that they maybe want to be more engaged in. But I think ignoring the fact that you have high performers that need to be retained in a different way is just it would be kind of silly. You have people who are performing. You have high performers. You know who they are. They're easy to name. It doesn't mean you have to go out and do ridiculous things, but you should invest the time and effort to keep those high performers, because they're very hard to replace. We talk about 25% to 100% cost replacement. Often those high performers are even higher, because they're usually multiplying in other people's work by being high performers as well. So let's not be shy about retaining high performers.
So is there a way to retain high performers but ensure that you're operating equitably across the organization, or do you kind of throw that whole equitable concept out the window when we're talking about your top performers? Or again, is there some middle ground there where we're doing things the right way, we're doing right by all of our people, but still finding ways to go above and beyond for our top performers?
Yeah, I think that equitable word gets used to replace to mean equal, and I would say it to me it should be fair. You want to treat all your employees fairly and make sure you're treating them well for the work they're doing. But that doesn't mean because the budget allows you to give a $2,000 increase to one set of employees, but you have a high performer, you want to give them a $10,000 increase. You've done fair and you've been right by what you can do the rest of the company. Then I'm not afraid to give the high performer the outstretched number. And for me, that's just a function of pay for performance, or paying for the work that they're doing. And so I've been in meetings where that equitable word gets used to kind of pull back and try to say we have to be equal with everyone. And that I don't believe subscribe to that. I say we have to be fair. If we've done what we think is fair and we think that Bob deserves that $2,000 increase, but we know that Sue has really, killed it. She's actually not even just helping Bob, she's helping 5 other people to be better at their jobs. Then pay Sue the extra $10,000 and be fair to the work that they're doing.
If you want to build a culture that people won't want to leave, check out Culture is the Ultimate Advantage, our free guide to turning your culture into your company's greatest strength. Click the link in the description to get your copy. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And don't forget to recognize someone for a job well done today. Mucho gusto.